Okay. Awesome. Very good.
Hi guys, how you doing?
Hi.
All
Hi.
right.
Hear me okay?
Press play. So I just want to, I've invited Michelle London here. She's actually an RCFE broker out here in Southern California. So in Southern California, or actually in California in general, RCFEs is residential care facilities for the elderly. So every state has a little nuance in terms of their designation as to what they call an assisted living care. So they could be adult residential care facilities for the elderly, residential assisted living. So anyway, so the designation in California is residential care facility for the elderly versus, say, an assisted living facility. So Michelle is actually a graduate from UCLA with an MBA in accounting and finance, longstanding CPA and real estate broker, and she specializes in buying and selling of residential assisted living properties. She has probably done hundreds. How many would you say, Michelle, at this point?
Oh, quite a few.
Quite a few, yeah. So Michelle, you're also going, are you on two things? Because I hear a double echo.
Oh, Melvin, you'll have to shut your door.
Oh, Melvin's right next to you.
I really like Michelle. She's a Bruin. Yay, so am I.
Oh, yes, I am a Bruin.
We're perfect. The M&M. Yeah.
Excellent. Did you go to medical school at UCLA?
No, I did undergrad.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I was
Michelle,
back there in the 70s. That's a long time ago.
Wow. Where did you live?
I lived in Los Angeles at the time.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah, I lived in LA for 40 years.
Wow. Fabulous.
Until I moved to Orange County in California. I'm right
Okay.
near Laguna Beach.
Beautiful. Close by.
For you guys not familiar, that's like the nice part of California.
Yes.
Yeah. So gorgeous. She's actually really just down the street, and we just figured this out. So, but Michelle has a wealth of information. She has a little PowerPoint presentation, just basically talking about the due diligence aspect of getting your own RAL. Remember, her expertise is coming from the selling and the buying side, representing these buyers, understanding valuation. So she's going to be a tremendous wealth of knowledge. So I understand some of you guys are already actively looking at deals. So we'll put aside time at the end so that you guys can talk about it. And hi, Raj, how you doing? But I'll let Michelle take over and go from there.
Okay, excellent. Let me share my screen. Okay, well, we call it the title of this presentation is What to Look For When You're Buying an RCFE, and that stands for Residential Care Facility for the Elderly. I know a lot of places you call it residential assisted living, but for us that encompasses senior living, adult living, that for individuals perhaps that have developmental disabilities under the age of 60. And here in California, they also have residential care facilities for the elderly that are also developmentally disabled. But the current statistics are that America is aging, with about 4,000 people turning 85 every day. That calculates out to about 1.5 million. And most people, the statistic is the average age of care that most people need care is about 83. And the average person requires about 3 years of care. So when I say 85 every day, that's kind of right exactly in the area where people are needing to have some significant care. And that can be obtained through one of the large assisted living facilities like the Brookdales and everything, or they could get at-home care, but that's probably double or triple the cost of living in a home-like environment in a residential care facility for the elderly. And from what we see, demand for nice residential assisted living facilities is strong. Even with interest rate hikes, we get calls every day from buyers ready to buy. So apparently there's a lag time between the interest rate increases and people's ability to still afford a home such as this. So we find demand is strong. Market time is taking a little longer, but there still is incredible demand. So you come for your tour. Let's see. Can everybody see the top of this, or am I blocking it?
Yes.
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 Okay, I
Yes.
wasn't sure about that. Side by side view is what I'm supposed to be going. Where is it? No, I don't. Side by side view.
Michelle, we see the screen fine. Are you having trouble on your end?
Yeah, I'll just hide the self view. So you arrive for your tour and you're really excited. The one thing to be aware of is before you have the tour, they will probably make you sign a non-disclosure agreement and release the financials so that you have a good idea financially what's happening in this business. So you arrive, and this is probably the only time you're going to get to see the home prior to putting an offer in. So be really observant. Look at the home. After the home has an accepted offer and you go into escrow, that's when you'll be able to perform your due diligence. And that means you have an opportunity to investigate any aspect of the home that you want, like have an inspection. And it gives you an opportunity to look at all the business documents and see exactly what's happening in the business. And you'll be able to trace business documents like resident rents. You'll be able to trace it to a third party source, like a deposit on a bank statement. So you will be able to verify the major items of income and expense. But when you look at the home itself. Does it seem like it's in good condition? That can be verified by an inspection, which you will do during the due diligence phase when you still have an opportunity to back out of the transaction without any penalties incurred. But also look at the residents. Do they seem like they're being taken care of well? In a good home that's functioning properly, the residents should be. Their hair should be brushed, they should be taken care of. And consider this, in many cases, you will be inheriting the caregivers and you may want them to stay on. So I kind of suggest when you go to the home, and you will be going under the guise of looking for a loved one, they want to keep these sales confidential. So kind of talk to the caregivers, see if they seem nice, responsible, attentive to the residents. Even talk to some of the residents, because these are the residents you'll be acquiring. So just see. And when you look at the home, pay attention to your gut feel. Does this home have a good vibe? That's the most important thing with the home, whether you buy a home that already exists or whether you buy one for conversion. The home has to have a good vibe. We have talked to operators who have mentioned to us that they bought a home that was a good deal financially, but didn't really have the best vibe. And they kind of thought with their loving ministrations, they could turn it into a home with a good vibe. And several people have told us this, that they never could. So I was mentioning this to a friend and she said, well, that's feng shui. And if that is feng shui, perhaps there is something to it, because homes have personalities just like people. And some homes have bad personalities. Okay. I'm having difficulty advancing the screen. Let me just.
Michelle, maybe at the bottom left of the screen, you can, I don't know if it's right up there.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Oh.
Okay, and that went back. Okay, so maybe it's the bottom right. My apologies. You want to know whether purchasing an existing residential assisted living home and business, is it a good question? And I adamantly say, if you know the right questions to ask, it can be an excellent investment. And in two ways, too. The first part will be your bread and butter. That'll be the earnings from the business, your net operating income. In California, traditionally, it's been an excellent place to acquire real estate. Real estate has appreciated enormously. So that'll be your icing on the cake in the back end, because if you purchase the actual home too, that's a hedge against inflation. It's a forced savings vehicle. You will realize equity, and at the back end, the appreciation when you sell, you'll realize that. So it's an ongoing good investment, and when you eventually sell, that's when you'll realize the real benefit of the appreciation. You might have a question as to why the owner's selling. They may not always tell you. They may say that they're retiring or moving out of state. You just may not know. And it could be, once you look at the financials, that you'll see the business just is not operating profitably. So you do want to know that for a period of time, unless you want to buy a distressed home, there is the possibility to buy a distressed home without many residents or anything, but you've got to run this with business acumen. You have to have some financial savvy and some ways that you have worked out ahead of time for getting residents inexpensively, for getting caregivers inexpensively. The important thing with a business like this is controlling costs. And there's ways to do it with residents and with caregivers. And those are the biggest line items that you'll see on a monthly operating expense. And I think the biggest mistake that a lot of care homeowners do is they don't put together profit and loss statements on a timely basis. So they don't even know if they're controlling expenses. They really have no idea the standing of the business. So if you want to purchase a business that's up and going and profitable, you want to see that there is a track record of such operations, and they should be able to provide you with adequate number of profit and loss statements. You want to know too that both the home and the business are good investments. Your agent will be able to perform what's called a comparative market analysis, where they look at comparable homes in the area to get an idea for a home of that model, a single family residence that's not modified like a care home. Roughly, what are the prices? But the trick here is the real comp for a care home is another care home, but you can't always get that information because so many of these sales are confidential, and you'll never find out the terms or the price or anything like that. So the best approximation is to compare it to other homes in the area. You'll be able to determine if the business is a good investment by an examination of the financial statements and supporting documents. You might wonder what size RCFE you want to start with. In practice, in California, most of the residential assisted living are 6 beds and under, but mostly 6 beds. There are a number of the larger ones, but for example, let's say you're buying a home to convert and you want it to be more than 6 bedrooms in California. Well, that is considered a commercial property. And for commercial properties, there's additional regulations. You might have to get a conditional use permit or a zoning variance, but zoning in most areas of California will permit a 6-bed anywhere. But for larger, there's special procedures you have to go through, and I can address that. Be fiscally sound. When you look at the home, don't become so enamored of the home that you lose sight of what the business operations are. And you want to consider, what the neighborhood is like. Ideally, you want to purchase it in an area that's growing and appreciating, because in the end, when you sell, you'll have the benefit of all that appreciation. And also, if it's in a declining area, it may be very hard to fill when you get a new vacancy, because visitors will see what you see. They will have the same kind of impression. And when it's a family member looking for a loved one, they will be, what's the word? They will be more discerning in terms of what amenities and everything they would like for their loved one. So look at statistical information for the community and see that it's growing and that the age shifts. Ideally, a good community to move into is where there's a large group of people about late 40s to early 60s, because they would be likely to have a parent that might need care. And if they want them to live near, the family, they would probably put them in the same city. The home itself, does it command extra special features? I mean, is it a home that has private bedrooms for every single resident? And I'll discuss that later, but that could be an important factor. There are a lot of homes that that are 6-bed. And when I say 6-bed homes, I don't mean 6 bedrooms, I mean 6 residents. They might have them stuffed into 3 bedrooms. And those are very hard to fill when you get a vacancy, and they're very hard to sell on the back end, because these days with COVID, almost everybody wants a private room. If you're planning on converting, I have to tell you, so many people are in love with their 3% mortgages. They don't want to sell. So they've decided to add on to their homes, modify them, do a little bit of renovation. So they're staying in their homes longer. So if you decide to convert on your own, you're going to have a lot of competition as to contractors. They're charging premium rates right now. They're cherry picking their jobs. A lot of them come in with cost overages. So you've got to be very careful about getting accurate budgeting if you plan to do that. And there are some challenges sometimes. Depending on the size of the facility, you may have to get the permission of your neighbors to make modifications, and depending on the city. Certain cities have something called a neighbor impact form. So if you're going to do any modifications, they make you get the consent of your neighbors that will be affected. And sometimes the neighbors don't want a facility like that in the neighborhood. So overall, when you're thinking about converting, you have to analyze what is the cost to buy an already existing home and business versus converting a home, and that could be anywhere from $50,000 to $250,000, depending on what kind of work needs done. We've known of homes that are roughly 3,000 square feet with 4 bedrooms, but there's enough square footage there to reconfigure the rooms into like 6 bedrooms and a caregiver area. So sometimes it's a good step, but when you do that, you have to think about the cost of modifying, the cost of obtaining and training caregivers and the cost to obtain residents. If you don't have a marketing plan, which will guide you in obtaining caregivers and residents in a very cost-effective way, you'll have to develop that business savvy to do it. Now, for example, for caregivers, a lot of people use a caregiver agency because the need is immediate. You can't wait till next week. You need somebody to cover the shift tonight. But the thing is, with caregiver agencies, that could be $30, $33 an hour, compared to, like in California, most caregivers are paid between 17 and 19. So you want to be aware of that contract labor, and just wondering why that home had to rely so deeply on contract labor from a caregiving agency. And another point too, you'll want to find a way to get residents relatively inexpensively. For caregivers, you can scour the local CNA programs, nursing assistant, find out, become friendly with the proprietor of that program. They have job boards, things like that, and maybe you can hire somebody just out of school. It'll be a lot cheaper than using a temporary caregiver. And for example, for residents, instead of paying referral fees to an agency, you really need a good website and good marketing plans to outreach. You want to get known in the community so that when people consider what home to place their loved one in, they'll consider you. During the due diligence phase, you will get the opportunity to do a home inspection. Don't forego this necessary step. In a general home inspection, they will inspect the HVAC, the plumbing, the electrical. They'll look at the roof. They'll look all around in the attic. They will just get a good idea if there's significant deferred maintenance, or if there's parts of the home that are just not operating correctly. Now, in that case, I know in California, what you can do after you've discovered some problems, you can put in a request for repairs to the seller. So that's another chance that you'll have to negotiate after you have an accepted contract. You may be asking for certain repairs to be performed. They'll typically never do anything cosmetic. But if something isn't working properly, generally the goodwill of the seller prevails, and they'll either make those repairs or they'll issue you a credit. What you also want to see, I know in California, about half the care homes, about half the homes have termites or some degree of termite problems. You want to make sure that you get a termite inspection and you get something called Section 1 clearance. And that means that the home is deemed free of termites, pests, and other wood destroying organisms. So you want to make sure that you're getting a home in as good condition as possible that has been taken care of, because that will be costly for you later on. If you're planning significant modifications, as I mentioned before, some cities require their neighbors to sign off. And if you're having the thought that you will perform significant modifications, and it is a city that requires your neighbors to sign off, I would suggest introducing yourself to those same neighbors very early. Your agent will be able to provide phone numbers if you don't feel like just going and knocking on their door. So find out. We had one client who bought a residential care facility, and it had 4 bedrooms. Well, he wanted to expand it to have 6 bedrooms. And this was a community in which they required a neighbor impact form. Well, the thing he didn't know, and he would have found out had he discussed it with the neighbors, is that the old home was not on terms with the neighbors. The people in the neighborhood resented seeing when somebody would pass on in the home, that gurney being wheeled down the side of the home into an ambulance, and they'd say their kids would see it and they didn't like it, so they blocked him entirely. They wouldn't sign off on his form, and he was never able to expand his home and really get the full rents that would have been possible. So you do want to look around, but anything that's noticeably damaged, an inspector would notice things like cracks on the walls, the patio, slopes in the flooring, stains on the ceiling or walls. These could be indicative of water damage or something with the foundation. So you will, with the home inspection, be properly apprised of any issues regarding the home. As far as resident rooms, as I mentioned, in the COVID era, people are much more inclined to want a single room, a private room. I would suggest, if you're buying a home, don't get more than maybe one shared room, because there's always going to be someone who maybe can't afford to pay a private rate. And one shared room is okay, but predominantly people are looking for private rooms today, because in this COVID area, I'll tell you, the larger homes, the nursing homes, the large homes, they did not fare very well in terms of infection control. They were hit pretty hard with COVID. Whereas the small home model, a residential care facility that has 6, 8 residents, they proved much better. And they didn't face the same challenges with COVID that the larger facilities did. You want to find out that the rates are comparable to area norms and see what the rates are. Your agent can help you with that. Find out what comparable rates are, and you'll determine too whether the rates are very low in the home you're going to be acquiring and whether you want to raise rents. Now, you want to know that the business has decent profit and loss statements. And during the due diligence phase, you will have an opportunity to look at the profit and loss, but you'll be able to trace it to source documents. Like, for example, there's an admission agreement that stipulates what the resident will be paying for rent. You can trace that amount to their monthly rent roll and the total of all the people on the rent roll. You can usually trace it to a deposit on a bank statement, because most people pay within the first 5 days of the month and they make one deposit. So doing it that way, you'd be able to check also that the sum of the deposits for every month equals the resident rents that are being reported. So you'll be able to get resident rents, rent rolls, payroll documents. What you want to do, or have your financial professional do, is like a mini audit of the financial statements using supporting documentation to ascertain that the financial statements are accurate, reliable, and fairly stated. Occasionally, an owner will own several facilities, and what they do is combine all the P&Ls for all the facilities. They think probably that they're never going to sell one, but sometimes a change in family circumstance, a change in health, a pandemic can change their plans. So you want to make sure that they will separate out the financials so that your home is segregated, the one you're hoping to acquire, so that you really have a great idea of what the financial position of that one home is. But it is a challenge to do, because they'll have to prorate or separate out the expenses for things like resident rent. You know what they're paying in the home. But for payroll, if the homes are located very close to one another, they may be using the same caregivers in several homes, and it may be a challenge to come up with the payroll total. So you may not really get the best idea of what their net operating income is. So if it's a combined report, have your financial professional review it. And by the way, I'm also a CPA. So when it comes to things like this, actually reviewing financial statements and tracing them to source documents, that's where our firm really shines, because we have that expertise and we have that financial acumen to know whether or not the business financials are being accurately portrayed. You'll be able to trace payroll costs. And as I mentioned before, there's payroll for people who are actually hired caregivers, and then there may be contract labor that they're getting from a caregiver placement agency. We have seen payroll percentages range from like 31 to 50% of gross rents. But to really be successful in this, you have to find a way to minimize payroll costs and, you know, all your other expenses. It has to be done like a business. So minimize payroll costs and minimize the cost of acquiring a new resident. Oops. Let me see if I can go back. Well, I think I missed this. Payroll. The question often arises is who works? If you're thinking of buying a residential assisted living facility and it's more of a mom and pop operation where the kids work, the cousins work, everybody works, well, they may not be getting the same type of minimum wage that we have here in California. Their family, they may pay them less. So if it's the owner and their family, you may need to hire additional caregivers, but be conscientious of what structure their workforce is. You want to make sure that there is no accounts receivable balance, meaning that the residents are paying on time. And usually they do. You do want to ask the seller if they've made periodic rent increases when the census, being the number of people currently living in the home, when it's full. You know, is it that they're afraid of area competition and feel they can't raise the rates? These are questions you'll have to address. Payroll, sometimes there's awake staff, or at least that's what we call it in California, where a caregiver stays awake all night and does required chores, checks on the residents, as opposed to having a caregiver who has their own room and can be summoned by a bell or an alarm. So that's a premium type of amenity. And often families are willing to pay more for that convenience and comfort of knowing that their loved one can summon help just at a moment's notice. You'll also get access to the bank statements. And if they use a credit card, to credit card statements. Hopefully they don't use just one bank statement and one credit card for personal and business use. You want to check online sources. In every state, there is a licensing entity, and they typically make annual visits to the home, surprise visits just to see how it's operating. Now, they can issue a variety of citations, either no citations, no deficiencies noted, or they might find that there's paper type of violations, meaning there's paperwork that isn't as organized perhaps as they would prefer at licensing, and they may give you a citation on that. But the important citations to be aware of are the ones that involve resident care. And you want to know that they don't have a lot of outstanding violations relating to the care of residents, because that's not a healthy home. It just isn't. So you want to review the licensing reports, and you want to read online reviews about the residential assisted living. You can typically just Google the name of the home, And they'll have a place for a website where you can look at the website of the home. And they also will have a place for reviews. And I would suggest that you really look at those reviews carefully to see how the home has been operating. That being said, we have sold homes that had terrible reviews because, as it turned out, when we inquired as to the nature of those reviews and why they were so scathing, it was one family that had a vendetta against the seller and started a testimonial campaign where they wrote scathing reviews about the home. And, without the explanation of the seller, it would have been not understandable why there would be so many bad reviews. It was all out of one incident. Also, check the RCFE's website if one exists, your residential assisted living home. You want to see that some attention has been paid to the website, because when you acquire your home, you want to develop a really excellent website that you can use for marketing purposes also. You want one that will have a video of the home and pictures of like ongoing activities, 4th of July, an ice cream social. You want to see, has this existed in the home before, and have plans for what you're going to do with your home, what kind of entertainment you'll provide. And a lot of homes do. A lot of the homes that have a lot of living left to be done, they'll have singers come in. They'll have a musician come in and sing. I went to an Alzheimer's home once. It was specifically for Alzheimer's residents, and it was a lively place. Often when you go into those homes, everybody's sitting in their own little reclining chair. And by the way, I recommend that. Some homes, they have couches, sofas, chairs, but it's very hard to get out of for these seniors. What every senior wants is their own reclining chair. So go to the RCFE's website and see. You yourself will be using your website as a marketing tool. You'll have pictures, you'll have videos, but it'll be a way to attract residents. And you want to know, has this been done before? Is it a bare bones? And what you would do differently. This is just a minor thing about over-reporting or under-reporting income, and that's if they're not taking account of refunds. Occasionally somebody has a short month or they pass away and there's a refund due. If they don't subtract that from the gross rents, then the rents will be overstated. You do want to receive a copy of the the loss run reports for the facility. Loss run reports are issued by the insurer for like professional liability, workers' comp. They'll give you a history of any claims made. You want to make sure that this home has not had significant problems in the past that have not been corrected. And as far as a website, you want to make sure that your website and the website that you've seen, it promotes good feelings about the home, that it gets traffic, and that there's always testimonials from happy families and residents. You check out your area competition. When it comes to the price of the business, you're predominantly paying for goodwill. What is goodwill? Goodwill it includes a number of things. When you're buying the business, obviously you're buying the furniture and equipment, home goods, appliances, that type of thing. But goodwill encompasses much more. It gives you the right to operate under the seller's license until you get your own license. Typically, escrow closes and the new buyer has the right to start operations immediately and get revenues. And that's only because they have the right to operate under the seller's license. And when you think about it, it's an excellent thing because whether you're buying or leasing a home, there's all those months that will go by until your license. If you had to wait for your license to begin recouping revenues after you've made your payments, it's a long time. So it's very essential that the buyer is able to operate under the seller's license, and that's good. And some sellers are more amenable to providing training and orientation than others. So that's something you want your agent to write into your contract, that you need a good number of hours. I'd say at least 40 to 60 hours of training and orientation, where they don't teach you how to run a residential assisted living facility. They teach you how they run it and their systems. So the goodwill, it's mostly the right to operate under the seller's license. It's also based on the principle of anticipated future cash flows from the business. And you'll note that from historical records, your P&Ls. And it also reflects the reputation of the community. You want to know about the neighborhood. Is it oversaturated? There's some places here in California that have, in maybe one city, they have 200 care homes. And there are some operators that are doing really exceptionally well in those. And then there's some operators just can't seem to fill their facility. So you want to find out what's coming on the market. Are there a lot coming on the market? Are there really large facilities that are charging just incredibly low introductory rates to get them in there? So your real estate professional, if they specialize in senior care facilities, they'll be able to get all this information for you. Sometimes we put what's known as a clawback clause into the contract, and that simply means that if in the first 3 months you lose residents and it's not due to a rent increase and it's not due to a change in the care needs, then sometimes you can recoup some of your investment if you lose a resident. Those are complicated to prepare. It requires a lot of agreement between buyer and seller, but it is a possibility. If you like this presentation, please subscribe to our publications. You can either text your name and email to 949-397-4506, or you can go to our website at www.rcferesource.com. And I'm opening it up to questions now.
Michelle, before we jump to questions, that was just simply phenomenal.
Oh, thank you.
Has bought multiple homes. We've done numerous strategies. And I can tell you, like, just listening to what you thought, I wish I had known this a couple of years ago, because so much of what you said is stuff that we've kind of stumbled through and learned the difficult way along the way. So what you've said is just phenomenal. Guys, I do want to say something, like, don't be scared about the stuff.
Oh, it's a bright future for these
Yeah,
homes.
I know a lot of it seems like overwhelming and just kind of maybe scary stuff. But these, like, you know, if you really take this to heart, you'll know what to look out for. This is a business like anything else. And the people that are selling these homes really want, ultimately, they just want the best value for their business. So you have to understand what they're actually offering and see if it is actually going up to par with what they're asking for. And you can understand with these questions and what to ask for, what it's actually worth. So you can really negotiate heavily, especially at this time of year when, this environment with our economy right now, there's a lot of great deals to be had. And we're not backing down as our group, ourselves. We're actually looking to get 3 more homes before the end of the year, or at least under. So this is a great time to get into it. We have a couple of questions, but really, I just want to, actually, Michelle, do you want to end your presentation slide share, and then we
Sure.
and then maybe we can just go directly to questions and just have a group discussions. I know there was a couple of chat questions, but I think it would be better if people just ask it out so that they can ask what they want to. Raj,
Michelle, that was
you had,
fabulous,
the
by
first
the way.
question. I'm sorry.
Sure, Michelle. Thanks for the great presentation. The question I had is, some commercial real estate we use only the sellers brokers. Do RALs have both buyers broker and sellers broker, or do you usually have only one broker per transaction?
I would say in the majority of our transactions, we have represented both the buyer and the seller because our database is 10,000 strong. We have a lot of connections. So we typically, for a home in any area, know who to match it up with. We know exactly what people are looking for. And when it's that perfect match, we introduce them, and it usually, so I would say predominantly we represent both sides of the transaction, but in about 25% of the cases, there's a buyer's broker and a seller's broker.
Sorry, one follow-up question. So I have a question about valuation of. You said it says there is some goodwill. So how do you actually evaluate the RAL? For example, do you take into account real estate value on top of it? You go to business value. How do you actually value the RAL? So that's what I'm
Home
slightly
and
confused
business are
about.
valued separately. The home is based on comparable homes and comparable properties in the area. The business is based primarily on their net operating income and their gross rents and how well they're controlling expenses.
So one of the things I've seen in the market the last couple of years was that sellers were doing where they were selling both the real estate and the business component together, and they were able to get these appraisals on the real estate side that would basically essentially cover the business side. Now, I'm not sure we're going to be able to see that a lot more. The advantage of doing
Not now.
is because now you can get a lender that will basically finance your entire purchase with 80% loan to value versus you having to come to get a separate loan for the business side. So
and there's great financing to be had. I would say about 75 to 80% of our buyers who need financing, they elect to get SBA financing because the terms are so good. It allows you to come in with 10% down on the home. And in California, it's typically $1 million home. So 100 versus 200,000 for a conventional loan, that's a lot more. And they'll allow you to come in with a cash down payment of 20% of the business. They can be refinanced after 3 years without prepayment penalty.
The downside is SBA is fairly expensive right now. You're going to be premium. But again, as Michelle said, you hold it for 2 years. I think you have to at least hold it for a year, but then you can refinance. And then, hopefully, who knows what the interest rates are going to be doing at that point, but hopefully they will be lower by then.
Yeah, well, they're expecting it's going to be a fairly brief recession that'll hit in the second or third quarter of 2023. What always happens in the case of a recession, after that peak interest rate has been reached and the recession starts to subside, interest rates always come down. Always, in the last 6 recessions that we've had. Now, depending on how high the interest rates, they may come down proportionately. Like I know in the 1990s when interest rates were 16%, they came down a bit. But they will come down. We're expecting they'll settle somewhere maybe in the high 5s, mid 5s.
Yeah. And this is such a high cash flowing business that there's a lot of room to play. It's unlike, you know, where cap rates have really compressed, multifamily, a lot of commercial spaces, a lot of commercial niches. If you try to find something, it's very hard to find something with a 5+ cap rate. You know, you're 5 and below, especially in California. Here,
Yes.
residential assisted living, some of the homes that we're getting are still at 11 cap, at our 12 cap, right? So if you don't quite understand what cap rates are, that's a different discussion, but I encourage you to write it down and just look up what a cap rate means. But essentially, you want to buy high at a cap rate and you want to sell low with a cap rate. So you can still get some phenomenal deals.
And a cap rate just essentially is your net operating income after certain add backs, like you would take out the seller if they're working as a caregiver themselves, you would take that out because a new buyer may not have that same kind of structure. You want to take out the influence of the owner as much as possible.
One of the things, Michelle, that you mentioned was as you're taking it over and you're looking at the expenses, your expenses relative to what you purchased will go up because a lot of times these people that are selling it are acting as their own caregivers, managers, administrators, you name it, they're doing it. They're mom and pop operators, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to be coming in like that. So basically, you're going to have to hire an administrator and other caregivers, which is going to add to your bottom line. But the caveat is, you as a physician, if you implement it correctly and market yourself as that physician, can automatically come in and balance that expenses with the fact that you're a physician, and you can automatically start charging a little bit more than a lot of the competition around you. So you can start charging 15-20% more. Why? Because if you're doing it right and you're marketing yourself right, a lot of family members are going to understand the value that you bring. You know, it's not just the name or the title behind it, but a lot of the stuff that you can incorporate into your homes that will really make the families feel rest assured that, hey, mom and dad are being taken care of much better than they were with the prior owners who were non-physicians. So you can balance that offset. So, and that's one way. Even with our homes too, we don't actually write that into our pro formas every time we calculate that, but that's an automatic thing that we find out, that an automatic benefit that comes with time.
Mm-hmm. And we've seen so many care homes and talked to so many operators. We have a million suggestions. If anybody wants to contact me, who has acquired or has questions, please feel free to do so. Because there's ways to operate a home and give it that value add. There's homes where people sit around all day long and there's no activities, maybe lunch. And then there's other homes that have a singer come in, a church group, someone who will play games with them. They have all kinds of activities. I saw in this one Alzheimer's home, the guy had a keyboard. He was plugging away on the keyboard, and when he'd stop, he'd throw a big beach ball that could be easily seen by someone who maybe has sight problems. He'd throw it to each resident and they'd go around in a circle. People were having fun. It was lively. A lot of these places are like the last stop to nowhere. They're places people go to die. And then some of these homes are places where there's still a lot of living yet to be had. That's the kind of home you want, because those are the homes you can charge premium rents. There's some communities where the prevailing rate is, let's just, for example, say 6,000 to 7,000 a month, and then the home down the street's getting 9. Why? It's nicer. It has more amenities. So it's not that the area can't support that rent, it's that the amenities are people willing to pay for it. And often they are, because it's still cheaper than having someone one-on-one care or the larger homes.
Perfect. Yeah.
Hey Michelle, I just wanted to ask, so I'm looking in the state of Iowa. I've talked to a few real estate brokers here. Unfortunately, not many of them are well familiar with this particular real estate.
And then
And
they won't know the right protections to write into your contract.
correct. So from a local perspective, is it just kind of trial and error by fire? Keep asking different real estate agents, whether it's different companies, hey, do you have a particular agent that works specifically within this realm of business?
Not
And
many agents do.
okay.
It's
And
a really thin niche.
and in regards to finding already pre-established running businesses, are there other off-site websites that are just purview to those specific agents that are aware versus a general public listing offer?
Well, there are some good business sites. There's one called BizBen, BizBen. There's
Yep.
BizBuySell.
Yep.
There's One Connect with Connect spelled with a K. There's LoopNet, one of the best. There's CoStar.
So, but is it that are there ever like quote unquote private sales where like you had mentioned
Yes,
yourself
there
where
are.
you
All
have a
the time.
private seller?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of the deals we find are actually not listed on any of those sites. And
Okay.
it's simply because owners don't want it to be known. So some of
Right.
the ways to start is like, yeah, start with a broker that may be listing. If you go look on LoopNet and you see a deal and you don't like that, you vetted the deal and you find that it's not a good deal, you can ask him about other deals because chances are he may have other pocket listings that you may not know. Secondly, there's a lot of assisted living Facebook groups. There's a lot of private groups out there that you can put your name out there and say, hey, listen, Third is just reach out to a couple of managers. You'll be amazed at how many people, administrators and owners just finally think about, you know what, maybe it is time for me to like stop doing this. Many have not thought about listing it, but then when you ask them, they're like, hey, well, you know what, maybe this is the time for me to divest. So making those connections early on in the community, and even if they don't want to, I guarantee you they know someone that's looking to sell, and those people looking to sell don't know where to start, right? So you're putting these two groups together where they don't want to list it publicly and they're not sure what to do because they're like, well, if I start listing it, it's going to create panic in my own home. It's going to create panic in the family members. So so you have a great opportunity to connect with someone that doesn't want to publicly announce that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
because for the most part, they don't want their caregivers to find out ahead of time. There may be a mass exodus, and they don't want to worry the residents and their families. So we tell owners, and this isn't exactly the way it should be. Licensing in California tells you that you have to very quickly let the residents and the caregivers know and the families. But we say delay that a little bit until the sale is a sure thing. There's something called contingencies in a contract, and those are things like inspection contingency, loan contingency, and appraisal contingency. When they've inspected it and signed off that they're fine with it, when you have your loan approved, and when the appraisal comes in at price, then the deal is a sure thing. Otherwise, like 40% of all deals fall out of escrow. So you never know. Why get your residents unnecessarily agitated about it?
Right. A lot of the homes that we're purchasing in our own group have actually been coming from off market, like, privately listed, not publicly announced kind of thing. So don't underestimate the fact just because you don't see it advertised, there's a huge market of people buying and selling RALs. That's one of the things I didn't realize when I first started, just how big this business goes on in the background, quietly and silently, Dheeraj had a question. Dheeraj, do you want to ask your question or do you want me to? Well, Dheeraj's question was really, I don't know where he is, but his question was really can you classify RCFEs just like multifamilies? Is there an A class, B class, C class, D class? And if so, what are the attributes of these types of properties?
Very good question. And you know something? The answer is they're not formally classified. There is one database called CoStar where they'll list it as like a 2-star home or a 3-star home. But those don't really mean much because when you go to the home, you might see it's a lot nicer. But no, there is no uniform grading system for these. But the attributes of a really nice home would be all private resident rooms, a room for the caregivers, a good flow of traffic in, the room should flow nicely. So the resident rooms may be on one side, it should flow to the kitchen. It should be easy to get around for the caregivers.
Yeah, there's the way I look at it, there's like really two components. The one is the real estate component, and the second is the actual assisted living component. So
Yeah, they're two
real estate
business,
component-
two investments.
Yeah, the real estate is really easy, right? Like you can see, is it a nice neighborhood? Is it all private rooms? Is it spacious? What are the amenities like? What are yada yada, right? So that's the easy thing, the visual thing. The other side is the business side, which takes a little bit more effort to uncover, which is what is the reputation like? What's the care like? What's the ratio like of caregiver to the resident ratios? What have they have a lot of deficiencies? How are they in the community? What's their reputation? So that's the business side. So obviously the higher they score on each of those scales subjectively, the more they're going to be able to charge. And it's very true. I've seen homes that charge $8,000 per room, basically down the street from homes that are charging like $4,500, right? Similar neighborhoods, similar home styles, but it's really just a matter of the quality and reputation they built. So you can really stand apart by making sure that both components are addressed properly.
I do have a couple of questions. I just waiting for others to finish. So we talked about the NOI. So how much multiple of NOI do you normally give for buying the business, right? That's one question. Other question, is there a rule of thumb for expense ratio? For example, multifamily, we say it should at least be 50%. If someone says less than 50%, then the books are not right. So I assume the expense ratio is
20 to 25% is the net operating income if the home is being operated efficiently. When you
okay, so the
ask
expense
about
is like 75%. Okay.
75% expenses, yeah.
Okay.
Payroll is the major expense. It's what runs the whole thing.
So that, Michelle, I think is true for California. In a lot of different states, it can actually be closer to 65. So our rule of thumb in Arizona is 65 to maybe 70%. So
That's
but
even better.
California cost is a lot higher for a lot of different things. But then again, you can charge more too. I mean, like the rates for an average home are comparable to sort of more of a luxury home in Arizona that we find. What was your other question about?
How many multiples of NOI do you pay for
Michelle,
the
do
business?
you want to field that first and then?
Sure. After you have added back the effects of the seller on the business, meaning you add back any salary paid to the owner or their families, any car that they're running through the business. Maybe they're using the car not as transportation for the business, but just their personal auto. You're going to take the effects of the owner out of the equation. To net operating income, it's a multiple of between 2 and 3. But that also, you have to also examine what the gross rents are and see if they're comparable. When you look at gross rents, 2 to 3 times the net operating income should be about 6 months worth of gross rents.
So that number, the valuation on the business side is highly, highly negotiable and variable.
Yes.
So yes,
It's more of an art than a science.
exactly. We've actually purchased businesses with basically a one-time valuation, or basically have bought businesses where it's basically included in the real estate. Now, they may have been asking a little bit higher than what the real estate's really worth, but what they're trying to do is just get rid of the asset, you know, for whatever reason, life, family, et cetera, they're moving. They just want to get rid of it. They just give you the real estate, or they'll give you the business, just take the real estate off my hands. So especially in this day and age, I think you're going to find a lot of deals that you can really negotiate heavily. So I wouldn't really go beyond what.
So when we ask them what they expect, we should ask them, hey, what are you asking for the real estate, and what are you asking for the business separately?
Yes,
So
I
they
would.
both
Oh,
need to
you'll
be-
find out. You'll be told.
Mhm.
They will have already established a price by the time you go visit it.
Great.
Excellent. Let me see. I had some notes here. Oh yeah, so things about competition. Just one thing that we've noticed is at this point, we actually don't really care about like how many homes there are, or what competition is in the area. This was something that I really fretted about back then, but I realized that it really doesn't matter. If you have a top quality, top-notch product, you're going to set yourself apart. Okay. So here's an analogy, right? There's a billion handbags out there. You can buy a billion of them, right? But there's only a few very classic luxury brands. And this is something Dr. Renat, one of our partners, taught us.
Like a Chanel or Hermes, right?
Yes, exactly. Right. People can still get away with charging 75 grand for a handbag that does the same thing as a $75 one. So it doesn't matter what's around you, even the commercial assisted living facilities. They're not really your competition, because eventually they're going to outgrow the needs of those larger facilities, and they're going to need something smaller and more personal. So you want to focus on getting your home to that top level notch, you know, getting your physicians, whatever services you can offer that will blow the other competition away. You know, offering things that they can't because they're not medical professionals. You're going to set a new bar for your community, and people are going to want to stay there and fill that. So competition doesn't really matter in this industry.
No, it really doesn't.
And if I interject, you know, piggybacking off of what Senthil said, you know, there could be multiple homes, but you know, if you're going to put your parent into a home, the brand, being a physician and being a part of that home or running it is just, and I will say from our experience, acquiring properties is basically gives us an edge. You know, you feel much more comfortable whether you personally are offering the medical services there, but it's just kind of, you know, you look at something, it's like, you know, saying about the environment of a home, but when you know that it's a physician backed home or run, you just feel more comfortable. And me, even as a daughter, I would be more inept to put my mother or father in a home that's physician ran rather than, you know, another home.
Perfect. And then finally, if no one has any other questions, I was featured on a podcast. I wanted to share this with you. So Financial Residency with Tammy Kraus, their Grand Rounds version just came out today. So please do check it out. I'll send the link to the main page. And then we were awarded one of the top 10 elder care communities in service care providers in this industry in the nation just recently. So I think I sent out an email or shared that, but definitely check it out. But this is really something that you guys can do yourself. So I'm telling you, you know, I encourage you guys to keep going. Don't let this economy scare you. Don't let any of that frighten you. This is the best time. I'm telling you, honestly, like this is a great time to find a lot of deals. So I really hope you guys make it happen. Michelle, do you have any closing
Real estate
statements?
is appreciating.
Yeah, no, Michelle, your thing was phenomenal. I hope to have you again in the future. Do you guys have any final questions before we sign out?
Yes, I have one. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is Fidelis. I'm calling from Ohio. I had a quick question for Michelle. And so I would like to know, do you work just in California or do you have partners that work in other states?
No, we work in California. We have the ability to work in any state through an intermediary broker. It would still be us doing the work, but we may not have access to the same databases because I'm not licensed in that state.
Oh, okay. Okay. And then there were some websites you mentioned to find some of these sales. Can
Yeah.
you repeat those websites, please?
Sure. BizBen, B-I-Z-B-E.
And I'll write it in the chat, by the way.
Okay. Okay.
So, Michelle, I wrote BizBen, LoopNet, BizBuySell. Was there, you said there was Connect, right, with a K?
One Connect.
One Connect, okay. Perfect. I'm not even familiar with that. There, and then CBRE.
No, it's the number one.
Oh, sorry. They make it difficult to find them. Okay. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Michelle, thank you for showing up, and all you guys, thank you for showing up. I appreciate it.
Thank you for
And
having
also, guys, if you have any requests for the next topic, we may do another one regarding acquisitions. I know this is always a big one. I was thinking of bringing on one of the placement agents that we work with closely and giving her perspective on vetting deals or finding like the perfect areas. So things like that. Definitely, Michelle, we want to have you and Melvin on in the future. But you guys let us know what you guys want to hear. This is really geared for you guys.
Great.
Thank you.
Michelle. Michelle, do you have any
Thank you
closing
so
words?
much for having me. Happy holidays, everyone.
You too.
Thank you.